Sometimes you come across a story that surprises you, that sticks with you, that inspires you to share it so that others know about it too. I will say at the outset that I want to give full credit and kudos to the person who did the legwork on this story and the creators involved. Therefore, I'll be linking the original article in the pinned comment as well as the mods I'll be discussing. I'll also be saying a few words at the end about this too. What then is this story that captured my imagination so? Well, it's a story that connects Oblivion to one of the most beloved fantasy writers of our time. Terry Pratchett, the man behind the Discworld series, really enjoyed playing and, even more remarkably, contributing to modding Oblivion. This isn't the story of a famous author cashing in on his name or making some flashy project. Instead, it's about a creative mind who loved video games and found a special connection with one particular character in a fan-made mod. And I really hope that I get this name right. It all started with a companion named Vilja. But before we get into that, let's take a look at Terry Pratchett's love for games in general. His books are full of quirky humour, rich characters, and deep observations about the world. And if you haven't read it already, I have to particularly recommend The Long Earth, which I enjoyed recently. But outside of his writing, he was also an avid gamer. He wasn't just playing for fun either. He was genuinely fascinated by the possibilities games offered, especially when players could modify them, tweak them, and make them their own. He actively engaged with gaming communities, most notably through his deep involvement with the Thief series. Pratchett was an avid gamer, frequenting forums to discuss his favourite titles, and he valued the creative freedom and immersion that games like Thief 2: The Metal Age offered. Beyond gaming as a hobby, he contributed creatively to the industry, collaborating on the development of the Discworld adventure games. His love for stealth mechanics and problem-solving in games reflected his broader appreciation for narratives that allowed lateral thinking and exploration. He even voiced his frustration at the industry's early graphical limitations, but praised the advancements that allowed games to capture the spirit of his beloved Discworld novels. Through his posts on forums and collaborations, Pratchett fostered a unique connection between his fans and the gaming world. Oblivion, with its open world and vast modding community, particularly grabbed his attention. Modders were taking what was already a huge game and making it even bigger, adding new characters, quests, and features. Among these creations was Vilja, a companion mod made by a Swedish modder named Emma. Vilja wasn't any old sidekick. She had personality, an independent spirit with her own goals and quirks. Originally made by Emma to keep her company as she explored Oblivion, Vilja stood out because she felt more alive than the usual NPCs. She didn't just follow you around or repeat the same lines. She reacted to the world and the player in a way that made her feel like a real partner in the game. In 2010, Emma received an unexpected email. It was from Terry Pratchett. He had been playing with Vilja in his game and wanted to express how much he appreciated her character. In Emma's own words, the first letter from Terry arrived in March 2010, only 3 months after the original release. He also praised the modding community as a whole, mentioning how impressed he was by the effort put into mods and how much he enjoyed using them. Emma wasn't sure if it was really the Terry Pratchett at first, but it didn't take long for their correspondence to kick off. As they exchanged emails, Pratchett started offering ideas for how Vilja could evolve. One of his early suggestions came from his experience wandering through goblin dungeons. Similar to his interest in stealth in the Thief games, he wanted to explore without having to fight the goblins. He wasn't interested in the violence. Emma took this idea and created a goblin peace amulet that allowed him to do just that. Now, why was Terry Pratchett so interested in goblins? Goblins in Oblivion aren't the most memorable creatures on the face of it. They're not grand villains or epic bosses. They're more like background noise, a standard obstacle for players to hack through on their way to bigger treasures. But Terry Pratchett didn't see them that way. He was curious about them, drawn not to their danger but to their mystery. He wanted to understand these creatures, to observe them without violence, to see their behaviour and culture without needing to wield a sword. Pratchett's curiosity was deeply reflective of his approach to storytelling. In his novels, he often explored the forgotten, the overlooked, and the absurd. The goblins of Oblivion, with their crude camps and strange social structures, must have felt like a puzzle to him, one that went unnoticed by most players, but one he was determined to solve. He wanted to get inside their world, to watch and learn. Indeed, the goblins themselves have been the subject of curiosity in the years since the game came out, as in the fantastic video Goblin Wars by Rimmy Down Under, which I highly recommend you watch, since it dives more deeply into the topic. However, we can have a look at how the goblins in Oblivion worked to get an idea as to why Terry Pratchett might have found them so fascinating. As we've touched upon, goblins are among the most common humanoid creatures in Oblivion. They typically live in groups, inhabiting caves, abandoned mines, and ancient ruins. The entrances to these lairs are often marked with human skulls impaled on stakes. These creatures are surprisingly sophisticated, with members assigned ranks and roles within their communities. About half of the goblins in Cyrodiil belong to one of 8 distinct tribes. These tribes represent the pinnacle of goblin culture in Oblivion, each having its own shaman, war chief, home base, and a unique tribal totem staff. A totem is central to the tribe's identity and is guarded by the shaman, the spiritual leader. Stealing a totem will anger the tribe, but it does not trigger a full-scale war between tribes in the unmodded game, as is discussed in the Goblin Wars video, which again I highly recommend you watch after this. Each tribe can be identified by a tribal symbol on the right arm of its members. Goblins of one tribe harbour an intense hatred for those of other tribes, though they occasionally tolerate goblins unaffiliated with any tribe. The only tribe without a traditional structure is the Bitterfish tribe, which lacks a war chief, totem, or tribal symbol. Additionally, Goblin Jim, a Breton, serves as the shaman for the White Skin tribe, an unusual situation, as most tribes have a goblin shaman. Goblins demonstrate a rudimentary intelligence and culture. Within their caves, various chambers serve different purposes, from dining halls to armories and even religious or social gathering areas. Though goblins don't practice agriculture, they frequently raid other goblin tribes or human settlements for food and supplies. Interestingly, they have domesticated rats, which they keep as a source of food. Despite this limited intelligence, goblins are extremely aggressive toward all other humanoid races. They are known to be territorial and rarely leave their lairs unless on a raid. As mentioned, goblins are hostile towards other tribes, and in the game's lore, these tribes often engage in conflicts, primarily over the theft of the tribal totems. While tribal wars were intended to be a more prominent feature, they are only encountered in isolated incidents such as the Goblin Trouble side quest. Players can manipulate tribal tensions by stealing totems, but due to the game's limitations, this does not escalate into full-scale wars without the use of mods. So as you can see, there's a lot of depth and nuance to goblins, far beyond what could just be a simple enemy type. And while it's a shame there wasn't more implemented in the final game, it's definitely something that could capture a gamer's imagination, as it did with Terry Pratchett. The goblin exploration he was taking part in led to him writing some dialogue for Vilja, and things grew from there. Pratchett's ideas started shaping Vilja's character even more. He wasn't content with her being just a helper. He wanted Vilja to interact with the world in meaningful ways. For instance, after a particularly memorable moment in-game, Pratchett mentioned how his character wished he could give Vilja a flower as thanks for saving his life. Emma, the modder, ran with this and added a give a gift function to the mod where players could offer special items to Vilja, many of which Pratchett personally named. But it didn't stop at gifts. Pratchett started contributing even more dialogue for Vilja, helping to give her more depth. Much of Vilja's lines during the Thieves Guild quests came directly from him. He wanted her to feel like more than a simple follower. He wanted her to have a personality that evolved alongside the player's journey. During this time, Pratchett was living with Alzheimer's disease, a condition that affected his short-term memory. Navigating the sprawling world of Oblivion became increasingly difficult for him, but instead of giving up on the game, he came up with a solution. He asked Emma and fellow modder Charles C.D. Cooley if they could create a feature where Vilja could lead him out of dungeons when he got lost. This feature, where Vilja could take charge and guide the player to safety, became one of the most important additions to the mod. It took simple navigation and made it about trust. Vilja was no longer a companion who just followed orders. She became a guide, someone who could step in when the player needed help. This addition turned out to be hugely popular, not just for Pratchett, but for many players who found it added a new layer to the game. In 2011, Pratchett invited Emma to the launch of his novel Snuff, which he had partially based on his experiences in Oblivion. The launch took place on a steamboat on the Thames in London, and it was there that Emma realised how much her work on Vilja had meant to him. Many of Pratchett's friends knew about the game and the mod. It was clear that Oblivion and Vilja had been on his mind a lot during that period. Charles and Emma later reflected on how their collaboration didn't feel like they were just helping someone famous. It was about two people who shared a passion for games and creativity working together to make something special. For me, the interesting part wasn't that we were working with a world-famous author, Charles said, but that we were working with someone who truly appreciated the virtual person we were creating, and that what we were doing was making his life a little better. For Pratchett, it would seem that the time he spent with Vilja had become an extension of his creative life, a space where he could explore, tinker, and add his unique voice. Terry Pratchett passed away in 2015, but his influence on Vilja lives on. The mod is still available for players to download, and Vilja herself has even made her way into Skyrim as a descendant of the original character. Pratchett's involvement with Vilja is another expression of his love for storytelling in all its forms, whether through books, games, or anything in between. For Pratchett, modding Oblivion was a way to dive into a world and make it feel a little more personal. It's a reminder that even the biggest names in fantasy sometimes find joy in the smallest corners of a game, shaping them quietly with a light touch, but leaving a lasting impact nonetheless. So the next time you're wandering through Cyrodiil, maybe with Vilja by your side, remember that one of the most imaginative minds of our time helped bring her to life, one suggestion at a time. I just want to take a final moment or two to highlight the work done by the writer of the original article, Cian Maher. If you take a look at some of the comments below his piece, you'll see the impact that he had on readers, both fans of Oblivion and Terry Pratchett himself. Please make sure to go read it and leave a comment of your own to show your appreciation for the person who originally put this story together. Having read this piece years ago, it's been in the back of my mind ever since. It definitely impacted me and goes to show the power of truly brilliant journalism. I just want to make sure that the writer of the original piece gets the credit they deserve. You'll find the link, as I said at the start, in my pinned comment. Thanks everyone. See you next time.